Greetings and salutations, one and all. This is absolute chaos. I'm here today to mourn the relationship of the Mercedes driver pairing, that is George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. And that train was never going to be late, was it, peddlers? Listen, if there's one thing that F1 history, and I know the race is still going on in the background, but for once I'm going to indulge my bias. This is all that I want to talk about because this is the plot line. This is the story. And that is the acrimony, the impending acrimony that we see developing before our eyes. I will go for no longer than 30 minutes here, peddlers, but we need to talk about this. Techie and chaos is everything that I'm seeing between the Mercedes pairing. Max Verstappen will win this race. Second place will be competed between Alonso, Piastri, Lando and whoever else. But for now, I just don't even care. We need to talk about Mercedes, man. What is going on? Holy smokes. For those of you who've been hiding under a stone for the past 45 minutes, lap one, turn one, the Mercedes pairing come together. This was always going to happen at some point. It was always going to happen at some point. Let me dissect the incident first and foremost. It's techie, Mary. It is techie. I don't think Marcus is a million miles away from the truth, you know. Here's what we're looking at here, peddlers. Here's exactly what we're looking at. Listen, if I was to blur both of those two images and make them black and white, we wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Like that. Silverstone 2021, Qatar 23 are exactly the same bloody incident. Just switch Lewis around. Like I don't know how we can blame Max Verstappen for Exhibit A and then not blame Lewis Hamilton for Exhibit B. They're exactly the same incidents. Here's where I am. I'll dissect this, but then there's a broader issue that I want to talk to over the next 25 minutes. Here's what we're dealing with, peddlers. For the incident itself, I think Lewis, sadly, as a Lewis Hamilton fan, is absolutely banged to rights. It's techie. What makes it a little bit techie is the big sudden chink to the right that George does before that. If you rewind back the incident, there's a piece when George... I mean, it's the start, right? This is lap one, turn one, so you've always got to be a bit careful. Maybe you could argue that Lewis should never have put himself in harm's way that early into the race. You can never win a race, turn one, lap one, but you can lose one. Lewis will know that. But there's a broader context. Let me dissect the incident first. Just before this bit, just before the actual coming together, Lewis is kind of coming around the outside because he's already in his mind teed up. He's on softer compound tyres that only have anywhere between, 6 and 7 laps in them at a push. He's teed this up. So Lewis is very well aware if he's going to make this strategy work, which is a riskier maverick strategy, he needs to get ahead. He can't be getting held up by George and Max going forward. He just can't afford to. That will just burn his strategy. There is no point. So it's almost like a do or die situation for Lewis. I understand it in that sense. Just before this pictorial, there is a very, very sharp jink from George Russell. Now, it could be because of one and two things. It could be because Max is on his inside and he's got nowhere to go, or it could be because he sees Lewis coming up his outside and wants to jeopardise that run around the outside. I don't know. We'll never know. What happens next is techie. Lewis sees blood and goes for it. He tries to put one up the outside of George Russell. The problem being, though, you could just make the argument that Lewis should have left more room, right? Plain and simple, because sadly, he doesn't realise. I think here's where I don't think, in Lewis Hamilton's mind, he doesn't realise that Max Verstappen is immediately on George Russell's inside. In his mind, Lewis Hamilton's mind, in real time, he thinks it's a rerun of Silverstone, right? He thinks that all that's on George Russell's inside, on his right-hand side, is empty space. Ergo, he has wiggle room. That George, it's incumbent on George then to move to his right. Lewis Hamilton doesn't realise he's got no space on the right-hand side. So he gives George the squeeze and the two of them collide. It's bloody sad, this. I'm not watching, Chris. I can't. I'm stupid. I'm not watching. It feels like a nothing race. Max has done it, man. He's won the championship. I should be out here streaming, but I feel like I really wanted to get this out. And plus, I'm in charge of bedtime tonight, Chris, so I needed to get this out in the next 25 minutes. Bloody Nora. Okay, so they come together. That's what it is. The reactions, George Russell again gets straight on the radio. He's like effing and blinding, fuming, and he's entitled to be upset because in his mind, in real time, he's had his race ruined. Lewis parks up instantly, DNFs. That car can't continue. Yeah, my TV is off as well, Mary. I mean, sometimes you got to indulge your bias a little bit, right? Like I've got it on in the background, but am I overly invested in it? My driver's out, and there's been a Mercedes collision, and I think that's the story of the day. If I'm honest, Max Verstappen is gonna walk it. So what else needs to be talked about? Go on then. The nuts and bolts of this collision is in this. The reaction in the aftermath. George has been getting on my nerves a little bit. And I know, listen, personality, like we all talk about these things, right? We're all grown people and mature. And I can say if I'm not really loving the way George is moving at the moment, this is not a knock on the chap that gets into the cockpit every single race. I'm not talking to George Russell, the driver, first of his name, Kingsley in Norfolk. That's not what I'm talking about here. Smash the light for me, peddlers. I'm going to go another 20 minutes on this. I'm talking about the way George has been moving outside the cockpit in the press conferences, interrupting Lewis Hamilton as if he were the team leader of Mercedes-AMG Petronas, as an example. Those are a couple exhibits. I'll get to that in short order. George reacts straight away, heat of the moment thing. He's fuming, right? Feels that his race has been ruined. And I don't hate that, peddlers. I don't hate that. I understand that, for want of a better term. You're in the heat at the moment. Of course, you're going to F and blide. Lewis Hamilton fans around the world will say, naysayers, why is George Russell reacting like that over the pit radio? Again, can't you just sip it, George? I disagree, man. In the heat of the moment, it's perturbing as a Lewis Hamilton fan because all the time he's trying to leverage this strategic influence thing over the pit radio. He is. That's his durable competitive advantage, and I get it. But it does perturb me as a fan of Lewis Hamilton. So that happens. Lewis immediately comes over and says, he's like, well, what's gone on here? My teammate's taking me out the race, says Lewis Hamilton. And again, this is heat of the moment stuff. What's happened since? George has mellowed a little bit. Toto Wolf has checked him from his hospital bed again and said, listen, get your head down, George. Get on with the race. We can dissect whatever happened afterwards. This is the post-race debrief sort of stuff. This isn't to litigate or relitigate for mid-race. Get your head down, George. Get a move on. You're a racing driver. Race. Shout out to Toto Wolf for that, but Toto Wolf is going to have to take some flack in a minute here. Lewis, after the race, he gives his interview to the interviewer in the pen and says something to the effect of, I will hold that, I will take blame for that. I've squeezed George had nowhere to go. I will take blame for that. And it's quite sad after last race. George, and again, that's in response to George on the team radio saying 2 races in a row. That's where it gets a bit techie, isn't it? This is where it gets a bit controversial and polemic. Nenge, what's going on? This is where it gets a bit controversial because George has got this thing in his head that he's owed something, that there is a debt of gratitude to be paid from Lewis Hamilton back to him. And that's where it gets techie. And that's where people are going to cry all sorts of entitlement here. Because George, in my humble opinion, the way George has been moving post-race, in press conferences, in interviews, has not smacked of entitlement, but it's almost like he's assumed the de facto team leader role. And for Lewis Hamilton fans around the world, that's going to be like, bomber. Hold on, George. You're the mentee, not the mentor. So why are you moving like the mentor per se? And that's an issue. But here's where Toto Wolf has got to take some slack. And I'll go at this for the next 20 minutes now. If F1 history has taught us anything, if past is prologue, and again, my guy Peter Windsor has been talking to this for the longest time now. If past is prologue, you put 2 alpha males, alpha drivers in the same team, mix into that equation a competitive circumstance for the top step of the podium in a car capable of winning a race, bomber, combust, instant, ready to go combustibility. It is then only a matter of time until these guys come together. It was always. Now we can live in this F1 utopia world where Mercedes can manage it going forward and preemptively and all this other stuff. That you can say that if you want to. This was always going to happen. This was always going to happen. And listen, lest we be naive in our F1 fandom, this will happen again, peddlers. This will absolutely happen again. 100%. Chill out, you guys in the thing. Listen, Mary, I think Silverstone 21, let's just look at it. I mean, make both of those images black and white. You can't really tell the difference. The only difference being that Lewis has space on the right-hand side. George doesn't have anywhere to go, right? Because up his inside is the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. I think they're... I think... Go easy, Mary. I think they're very similar. Silverstone 21. Blur out those images and then they look pretty similar to me. Toto Wolf's got to take some flack for this. Listen, I understand why you signed George Russell. George Russell is the future. You need the next one. Lewis Hamilton will retire at some point. And who's going to be the next one to get you a 10th and outperform the car and develop and be the team leader in the car? I get it. But look, on the back of the 8th that was or wasn't, if you want to get, and again, this is Peter Winter plagiarism massively, but he's been around Nigel Mansell in 1992 and he understands the formula requisite for winning in an F1 car. Here's the thing. Here's what we need to know. If you have an alpha driver capable of winning the driver championship and your priority is to bring home some silverware and win yourself a driver's championship, then like a pyramid, you need to direct all your efforts in one direction, right? You can't be pulling in different positions. If history tells us anything, check this out. Senna, Prost, Webber, Vettel, Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton. If ever, past his prologue, yeah? If past his prologue, guys, you guys chill out in the chat, man. It doesn't need to always be so toxic. If past his prologue, catch this, this was always going to happen. This was the final destination. This was always going to be the partnership in final form. What's going on the while? I'm fuming at this. I'm so disappointed. But Toto Wolf is going to have to take some flack with your strategic 5-year horizon cap on. This was always going to happen, peddlers. Always, each and every single time. So nobody can't be surprised here that these two have come together. It was always going to happen. A matter of when, not if. And it will happen again, by the way. Lest Toto Wolf get these guys together and start and have them sign contracts, just like he did with Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton in 2016. If we come together, then there are going to be financial penalties for whoever is deemed to have been the cause. That's what's going to need to happen. They need to do this now. Otherwise, there will be more incidents. They're not even in this mess of a cake recipe. They're not even competing for first place in the championship, right? Put that in there, and of course they're going to come together more often. Of course they are. There needs to be rules of engagement here each and every single time. Norris 1.4 behind Oscar, 3 laps to go. Tenors, I think it's a done deal, man. I think it will set. This is why I came on so early, right? Because I thought the order wouldn't change. Max was going to nail it. Oscar, and then bloody Lando. But I digress. I haven't come on to talk about it for once. I needed to be super zoned in and focused and talk to this incident because it upset me, peddlers. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes you need to talk to your own subjectivity and recognise what's going on. That Mercedes find themselves in this SH1T show is testament to bad management. They need to get these boys together in a room and establish some rules of engagement, because this is going to get worse. This will be the first of many, and I can't get down for that. Toto Wolf needs to get out in front of this. Listen, in summary, then, if you're gonna lay blame at somebody's door, I can't not lay blame at Lewis Hamilton's door for the incident. Lewis thinks, and again, I'm going to put this up so that we understand the comparison, the parallels between Silverstone 21 and Qatar 23. The only difference here being that in 21, Lewis had room up his inside. The only reason why he didn't take the proper racing line is because of understeer, brief lockup or whatever, depending on who you talk to. Qatar 23, Lewis thinks George, and again, it's heat of the moment, then battle, turn one, lap one. Lewis presumes that up the inside, the other side of George, there is space. And that's why he kind of cuts into him. He's presuming that George is going to take a tighter line on the assumption that there is space. There's no space though, Lewis. There's no space. Had Lewis known that Max was the other side of George Russell, of course he would have given him space. But how's he going to there's too many things going on. It's lap one, turn one. You're trying to balance the car and extract enough pace out of the corner or going into the apex even to make sure that you can hold station. You're on soft compound tyres and they're only going to last a maximum of 6 to 8 laps, if that even. There's a lot of things going on, right? So of course, Patrick, I don't expect anything else. I don't expect anything else from Max. And he's he's a 3-time champion now. He's a 3-time champion, but there are a lot of ingredients that go into what will be termed the Qatar 2023 debacle. This was always going to happen. I blame Lewis Hamilton absolutely for the incident in isolation, but there are other things going on there. It's techie. There's a gazillion and one other things going on in the background. Lewis cut a forlorn figure in the background at all the press conferences, the post-quali press conference. Lewis didn't look right. He didn't look right. The bloody mistake that he made, the massive correction of the oversteer, he hasn't been right. There's something going on there. There's something going on. And if you listen to experts and aficionados, much more well-versed in the sport and the minutiae and the nuance of F1 than I, CPU is important, right? Excess bandwidth is critical for these guys that are driving the car and trying to get margin, USP, durable competitive advantage. Listen, if you can't focus because of whatever's going on outside the car, because you're trying to develop, because you're managing George Russell in a relationship with him, because you're managing Toto, because you're doing all these things, and then it's social, and then it's Project 4. If you're juggling all of these balls, then it's really, really hard to get into the car and just zone in. See, like Max Verstappen, Max has been brilliant all year, but the knock on Max is that he has that excess bandwidth, right? There's nothing else going on. He doesn't even need to look behind him to check where his teammate is. He's, in essence, today was a time trial for Max Verstappen, as brilliant as that chap has been all season. He has excess CPU. His ability to download and manage the race in real time has been absolutely unhindered. There's nothing. He has no competition, right? Lewis Hamilton's is a very different circumstance. And that's why these things start to happen, right? The bloody qualify. Oh, it's chaos. Chaos peddlers. I'm not happy, you know. Oh. Chaos between the Mercedes. Are you not entertained? Toto needs to hurry up and recover, man. Godspeed, Toto. But this is a managerial issue now. And it's something that needs to be... Look, this was bad today. But it will get from bad to worse very, very quickly, lest they address it. And it needs to be, it's not something that needs to be addressed next weekend, or it doesn't need to be addressed next season when hopefully they have a car that's ready to compete for the championship with Red Bull and McLaren. That's too late. My guy Peter Windsor said it's already too late because the acrimony has been bubbling, right? It's getting there. It's peaking. This will be one of many peaks, lest they address it forthwith going forward, because it's just going to get bloody taken a while. I'm not happy at all. I'm telling you, Fleetwood Mac. Oh my gosh, yeah. It's very, very techie. And maybe you could make the, you know what, Lewis Hamilton fans, the argument that people will make as well. Look, why is George fighting there? Not for the actual incident. I don't think you can hold George Russell accountable for the actual incident. But the sharp jerk left before, I mean, he's done that a couple of times in front of Lewis, hasn't he? And you can't... Listen, you talk to anyone that knows anything about F1. How did Gilles Villeneuve die if not for a similar incident, right? A high speed jerk in front of him, and then people die in those. So I think George needs to take... That whole sequence doesn't even happen if George is maybe a little bit more aware, a little bit more altruistic, but ultimately George Russell is a racing driver and he's not looking to let anybody get past him, even his teammate. But then you've got the consistent inconsistency of George Russell, right? Because he's going to talk about all this team ethos. He said as much in the pre-race brief. When they were talking to F1 TV, he said, listen, I'm just hoping that we can progress as a team. So if you're progressing as a team, if that's your focus, then surely the chap on soft tyres should take precedent. No? I'm putting out there, I'm playing devil's advocate. But it is an interesting one. It is a very interesting. In turn 1 or turn 10, it still would have won this race. Oh, I don't know. This is chaos. I'm really not happy at all. Cam says, Mary, Lewis and Nico part 2. It's enough now. It feels a little bit, it does feel, I suppose the only difference, and Baxty said this in one of his spaces yesterday, the only difference, or Diplo even, the only difference between Nico and Lewis in 2016 and George and Lewis in 2023 is that Nico and Lewis had, there was prior, wasn't there? There was history between the two. They'd come up through the feeder formula and there was always something there. Those two knew each other, but George and Lewis, they know each other only in that mentor-mentee relationship that they've had for a few years now, but it's different. Their relationship is evolving before our eyes. And listen, if the team principals, if the powers that be fail to address this in real time, then it's only going to happen again. We're going to be here. There are going to be more weeks like this when Mercedes fans all around the world are just losing their minds, because this will happen again, ladies and gents. If past this prologue, if we're to pay any attention to F1 precedent, see Senna Prost, see Webber and Vettel, see Nico and Lewis in 2016. And 2016 weren't the only year. It happened, that kicked off before then, right? 2014. Those dudes were fighting for a few years. So Toto Wolf needs to grab this by the neck and stamp it out now in real time. Otherwise, this is going to happen again. Lastly, I'll say on this, the issue that this presents to Mercedes, again, I'm going to plagiarise from Mr. Peter Windsor because he's infinitely more knowledge about these circumstances than I. Peter mentioned Mercedes have this blue chip image. They're almost like the anti-Red Bull, right? They can't race as hard as Red Bull because they have this very corporate image that they need to uphold, right? Mercedes-Benz are a global blue chip brand in that sense. And with that comes a way in which they need to conduct their activities. There's a way that they need to be seen to conduct themselves, lest Toto Wolf turn up at the AGM and have to justify bad behaviour to the board. You can hear it when George F's and blinds over the radio. Instantly, the next message is like much more tempered, right? Much more cool and calm and tranquil. Like it's almost like he's checked himself in real time, because he knows the one thing that Mercedes can't be seen, that they can't do the Red Bull thing. They can't be effing and blinding over the radio, because that's going to pose Toto Wolf a problem at the board. That's a disconnect. There was a Mercedes, because of their blue chip, whiter than white, straight-laced, buttoned up way of being. Because of that, they need to. That's why more than ever they need to nip this in the bud. I'm telling you, smash the light, peddlers. Otherwise, it's going to get hectic. Good luck, Toto Wolf, attending those board meetings. I'm telling you, racing in this incident. It's just a racing incident, says Anthony. I think overall, you know what? In some total, that's probably the best way of characterising it. But we're always going to do the blame game as an F1 community. And if you are going to place blame, I will go along with that, Anthony. It is overall a racing incident, just like Silverstone 21 was. And I'll bring this up again so you guys can compare and contrast. Blur those two images, make them black and white, and take out the logos, which I was going to try and do, by the way. And test somebody, which one of these is Silverstone and which one of these is just now at Qatar. Hard to tell, eh? They're very bloody similar. The only difference is that Max Verstappen is up the inside of George Russell, which is why I think, sadly, for Lewis Hamilton fans around the world, Lewis is going to have to take some flack for this incident. But he wasn't to know. Peddlers, I've just given you the broader context, tried to give you a bit of insight into Lewis Hamilton's head. He's on soft compound red labelled tyres. He's got a maximum of anywhere between 6 to 8 laps. His strategy is dependent on him on him leading the first lap in first position. That's the truth. That's just the truth. And if he doesn't manage to pull it off, his race is ruined. His instances, the probability of him winning the race trends down to 0. He needed to make it work. I don't hate Lewis going for that move, but what I do hate is the situation that he finds himself in. 7-time champion, rubbish car, unpredictable setup, unpredictable handling dynamic, and now you've got George Russell in the other car. I would play Peter Windsor saying, you know what, Peter Windsor's words, not mine. I would play it. He said, I asked him, this time last year, before all of this had kicked off, I asked Peter, and again, an F1 winning team manager with Nigel Mansell in 92. I asked him this: how would you solve for this position that Mercedes find themselves in? And I'll end it with this, Peddlers, because I know you guys want to go and watch some post-race debriefs. I asked Peter, how would you solve for this circumstance? This was 12 months ago, probably more than. And Peter said, I would get George Russell into a room. And I'm just reading your messages. We'll have a chat offline, Mary. What did Marcus say? He's going on about Silverstone. This is what Peter responded to me when I asked him for the solve. I would get George Russell into a room and I'd say, listen, you will never, ever finish above Lewis Hamilton. This is what your contract says. Your old contract, ripped up, sign this one now. That's what Peter said. And that was Peter being very bullish. But you see the sentiment. They need to solve for this, right? Ambiguity will lead to more incidents like this. I promise you. I asked Peter Windsor that question again. And so this was the other week. And Peter Windsor responded, Cam, I don't think there's a solve. I think they're already too far gone. Chaos. That, ladies and gents, is absolute chaos. Peter Windsor, team winning, F1 winning team manager, says for Mercedes, he thinks it's already too late, that Pandora's box has been opened. Chaos. Anyway, Peddlers, I'm going to go and say goodnight to a crying baby. You guys have been legends. Let me have a quick flip through your comments. Mary, were you killing Marcus for talking about Silverstone 21? Oh, Mary, don't do it, Mary. I still think, listen, you've got it up there. Genuinely, if I blurred those images, if you couldn't tell which one, if I'd blacked them out, and I did intend to do this before I came on. If you black and whited both of those images, it'd be impossible to tell which one was Silverstone and which one was Qatar. But for Max Verstappen at the inside of George Russell, I can't say fairer than that. I'll be honest with you. Tough to tell. Overall, a racing incident. If we're going to characterise their coming together, but if you're going to do a whodunit and lay blame at one driver's door, you know what? I can't say fairer than that. Lewis is ultimately going to have to. He's going to have to eat some. He's going to have to eat some crows, isn't he? Because I think he was more to blame. But hey, right, Peddlers, I'm going because I've had enough. I'm fuming. Congratulations. I wanted to speak about Max Verstappen very quickly because he's bloody nailed it, hasn't he? Incredible all year. I think he's benefited from the circumstance with Checo Perez. But you know what? When you look at some of his drives in isolation and eye test, he's been very good. his line of trajectory is going to be ridiculous. Yeah, Lewis, absolutely, Rory. Lewis had more space. George should have entered. I think, but George, at the point of impact, Rory, George had nowhere to go, right? As much as I'd love to place some blame at George Russell's door, I cannot. Not at the point of impact. If you rewind like a second or two previous, I didn't like the aggressive jink left that Lewis had to accommodate for. And I think, to be fair, Lewis's mindset was probably informed by that jink to the left. He's probably like, you know what, fudge this. Fudge this. I'm going to go for it. Lewis said, I don't hate it. We've been calling for the longest time a return to the 2007 mindset of Lewis Hamilton. But, you know, I don't know. Right, pedalers, I'm going to go. Enjoy the rest of the racing weekend. Enjoy rewatching it. There'll be loads of debriefs. I didn't want to talk about the rest of it because I was overly absorbed with the incident between the two Mercedes pairs, the two Mercedes drivers. Are you not entertained? There will be more like this. Get your managerial fingers out, Toto, and stamp this out. There needs to be some sort of clauses in that, just like 2016 Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. There needs to be some sort of clause in the contract. I am out. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, guys and girls. Between now and next time, there'll be a shakedown hopefully tomorrow at some point. Between now and next time, remember to look but never stare, and I will see you at the top.